Real quick, Bertie, is there an optimum amount of time to do mindfulness? Like you do 10 minutes here, is there a preferable time that's more beneficial?
Okay, so the question is there an optimal amount of time to do your mindfulness practice? Two answers to that question. One is, yeah, right now, every moment. But the other answer is, sometimes, during the day, a lot of people like to do it when they first get up. It's good to do when you're not sleepy because you have a tendency to go to sleep. As for how long, when people are starting, I generally tell them not more than 5 minutes because they waste their time and it gets to be something you don't want to do. So when you're starting people out, start them with a couple of minutes, say 5 minutes at the most, okay? So that it becomes something like brushing your teeth. You do because it's good for you, it doesn't take too long. But after a while, you realize that it takes a couple of minutes, more than a couple of minutes, usually to settle down and for things to start to get clear. So that's when people want to sit for a little bit longer. I don't have a timer for myself. I generally sit until I feel clear, and then I sit until I can really perceive what's going on, and I feel calm and clear, and my heart opens up. And how long that takes for me is 15 or 20 minutes typically. But sometimes I want to sit for an hour, and other times, my stupid 3 minutes, because I'm out of time. But it's different depending on who you are and what's going on in your life. But if you make it a demand, like you got to do it for 20 minutes, it becomes onerous. Something you don't want to do.
Thank you.
Okay, so sitting on my right is my former student and now friend and colleague and sometime mentor, Diego Berger. Okay, that's his name over there, and that's his website. And I have asked him to introduce himself, to tell you a little about how he comes to be sitting here with me in front of you, because he'll do a much better job than I would of giving you an introduction. So this is first going to be an introduction, and I'm going to ask him a question or two, and you can ask him a question or two also.
Hey guys, for me it's such an honor to be here. So thanks for inviting me, Spencer. Spencer has been a great mentor of mine for a long time, and the first class that I got into positive psychology was with you. I was very interested in that before. So I don't want to keep talking too long about myself, so quite fast. I'm from Brazil, so you're gonna notice my accent and maybe some things might be different in English. It's just a struggle for me sometimes. I'm from Brazil. I was a professional tennis player. So I left high school at 16 years old to play professional tennis. I played until I was 19. Then I decided that I wanted to help people to be happier. I was not feeling purpose in hitting a yellow ball for the rest of my life. And then I thought the best way to do that was through psychology. There's a lot of ways to do it. I was thinking of nutrition, physical training, but I thought those didn't have enough intellectual challenge. And then I thought of philosophy that had a lot of intellectual challenge, but I feel lacks a little bit of practicality most of the times. So I went to psychology, and since the beginning, I was really thinking on how can we increase the happiness of people, and seeing a lot of good things that have on books and academia, and regular people not knowing that. And then positive psychology becomes an obvious route. I talked with Spencer the other day, how much when he was like a grad student, he wanted to study more of those type of things, but at that time, positive psychology was not a thing yet. So I was more fortunate than him that the field was more ready, but maybe because of people like Spencer. So I really wanted to travel the world I don't know, I think it's common for many kids. So I did my undergrad in 4 different schools in 3 different countries. So I did 1 semester in Brazil, 3 semesters here in Santa Barbara. Then I went to a Buddhist school called Naropa in Boulder, very big on mindfulness. Then I went to Bhutan. Naropa is, I guess, one of the only, or maybe the only school that has this capacity to send students to Bhutan. Bhutan is very famous for gross national happiness and has received twice for the UN the best country on public policies for well-being, which has opened many doors for me academically. I have written for the United Nations and European Union. And then I went back to Naropa to graduate. Besides that, always in the summer, I was traveling the world, going to spiritual communities around. So I've been to 46 countries and studying many of different types of education. Places like Esalen that Spencer have went many times and lived here in California. with Schumacher College in England, Tamara in Portugal, Finghorn in Scotland. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. Then in 2019, I graduated. I went back to Brazil. I started seeing clients. I'm a therapist. I started seeing clients in 2018. I'm doing that until now. I do consultancy for companies, many times trainings in big companies like Oracle, Dell Computers, but also in startups when they're scaling up. I help them to create an HR that is more attuned with the culture that they want to create. And right now I'm doing my master's at UPenn, where positive psychology was created. So I'm studying under Martin Seligman, the founder of the field. And I guess that's a little bit of me. More than
Keep going.
I'm happy to answer any questions. I just don't like to be talking too much about myself.
These people recognize some of what you can say. This is a hip group of people. They understand.
Yeah, you know the closed? Finghorn closed.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm very sad actually. It closed. Finghorn, for those who know, was the most famous spiritual community around the world, and when I was there, it was the second oldest, and it went bankrupt last October. It was Finghorn. Yeah.
It's in Scotland, yeah?
Scotland, yeah. I was very sad about it. Yeah.
So let's see. No, I can use it with this. So just one thing about the program that he's in now, the Master's in Applied Positive Psychology program at the University of Pennsylvania. It's the center of the positive psychology world. It's the program that many of the famous positive psychologists have come from. Marty Seligman still teaches. He teaches weekly. Yeah. So he really got to if you're going to be a positive psychologist, he got to the source. It's where it really is still the absolute nexus of where things happen in positive psychology. So we went for a walk. I knew that what Diego had done, we'd been in some contact, not a lot, but some contact. But I went for a walk with him on Wednesday. We took a hike in Montecito because I just wanted to make sure he had something to say. Before I invited him, I invited him. And by the end of our little walk, I realized that he should be teaching us. And then I was going to learn a lot. I know that my first question to him would probably take the whole time. Well, you'll see. So the question is, if you had an hour or so to tell a bunch of people about what's important for well-being, what would you tell them? Now, can you hear him well enough? Is he? Yeah, okay. Yeah. If that doesn't happen, you let us know. We'll change microphones. You can use this one, for example, if that one doesn't work well.
Yeah.
Okay? Right. You need to...
Oh, yeah. Before that, I want to do some remarks, because that's going to take the whole class probably, and going to answer a lot of questions. It's going to be super fun. But I hope all of you know that how great Spencer is. No. I remember back, I have always had an interesting relationship with academia. I respect academia so much. I'm at UPenn right now, and I respect people that have been to best schools in the world like Spencer did. At the same time, I have a lot of criticism to academia. For example, that's why I have traveled to many different schools. That's why when I was here, I had the opportunity to go to Stanford, and Spencer was one of the persons that had been there. So it was like, should we go? And I decided to go to a Buddhist school instead. And that's why I decided to be in a big school, because I want to have both experiences. But I remember back in my undergrad, I knew, because I read the resume of all professors. Spencer was an amazing student at MIT. And then went to do his PhD and master's at Stanford. And I respect him so much and so highly academically, really. And so you were all very fortunate to have him as a professor, and now I'm very fortunate to have him as a friend, now and colleague. Okay, so besides that remarks, let me answer the good question, the important question. So actually, that's what I've been working on my thesis, on my master's, and it's a question. So I think, as I told you guys, one of the reasons that I got into this field is because I feel that there's so much more potential in human beings that we live in. We could be so much better than we actually are. And there's so much knowledge in academia, and not only from positive psychology, not only from science, but also from philosophers, and so many good things that we know would work, but we're not talking about, we're not translating this well. So my thesis is a new theory on happiness, doing a big literature review in the field, not wanting to say it's the most scientific way to put things, but I hope that is the easiest way and more comprehensive way to explain happiness for the population. So I guess the shorter way to explain what you need to do to have a happy life is about 3 things. So first, you need to take care of your health. Second, and actually most important, you should take care of your relationships. Okay? Relationships have been proven to be the thing that most increase longevity and happiness. Okay? And third, there's something on us that needs to be always growing. We're not happy when we're stagnating. So we need to feel that we're learning something, we're improving in something, we are growing in some way, because this motivates us to wake up every morning. I feel that this is a very easy way to explain. If you're doing this 3, you're pretty much happy. And it's a different way to put a model that many people have taught, even doesn't have a person that's coined it, because it's the first pillar is the physiological pillar, right? It's your body. The second one is your sociological pillar, right? And the third one is your psychological pillar. And I put it in this order because it's from the easiest one to know if you're doing right and to implement to the harder one. On the health side, it's crazy. How many hours are you sleeping? Like, how are you eating? Are you hydrating well? You can go to a doctor, do a blood test, and you see how well you are and so many things. Psychology is way more complicated than that. We try to put it in a more scientific way, but like, you cannot believe any psychologist say, oh, come here, you do 2 sessions and I will tell you how good you are. Like, that's not how it works. So many times you can be like repressing some things that can create a disease in the future, and it's way more complicated than that. Yeah. So I guess that's the simple way to explain happiness. I feel it's quite simple to explain. I think most things in life are simple, but not easy. Very simple, this explanation. Not easy to put into practice, right? But it's definitely simple. And I think it's important to understand its simplicity. And so many times, I feel that our ego, with a defense mechanism, because the ego gets irritated of his incapability of doing a simple thing. So it tries to create formulas and show how complex things are. And like, no, I can't do this because of this and that and that. It keeps creating something very complicated. And it's just a defense mechanism because he cannot do the very simple things. Because it's hard to do the simple.
So let's, so these are the 3 pillars that create well-being: the health, the relationship, and the growth pillar, right?
Yeah.
And you talked to me on Wednesday a little bit about some facets in each pillar, because a pillar has facets, right? So, what are some of the facets that you would mention about each of these?
Yeah, so let's start for the health one, which I think is the one that we can discuss the least amount of time. It's more simple, again, but I think it's a great contribution, because if you take Seligman's model on happiness, called the PERMA model, something that I think he left out, which is very important, is health, is vitality. So other scientists have promoted the PERMA-H or PERMA-V, so PERMA with health or PERMA with vitality. So the health pillar, I would say it has 5 facets to it. Right? So one is physical exercise. Right? Very important to do. The other one is the quality of your sleep. Right? Third one is sleep. The third one is nutrition. Right? The fourth one is time in nature. And the fifth one is the one we did before, is meditation. Although we think meditation is a lot for the mind, it has so many benefits from our body, because it decreases so much the amount of stress we're in. And I would say meditation and time in nature have become and are becoming each year more and more important because of the society that we are living in. It's so much time we are on screens, and we have with artificial lights, and so many things that cause our attention all the time, and we have been disconnected of our natural way of living. So our biology is not ready for all of those. So we need meditation and time in nature to
rich way to talk about what we need physically. I want to say a tiny bit about exercise. You don't really need to exercise. What you need to do is do the activity that you have evolved to do for the last millions of years. So it's a question of we have brought ourselves to a grinding halt, and it confuses the body. If hunter-gatherers don't need to exercise, that's what they do. But we have to do this artificial thing called exercise because we don't do what we have evolved to do. The good news is walking is great exercise. And the really good news is walking with somebody else satisfies 2 out of 3 pillars. With regard to time and nature, we talked about this a tiny bit. It has been my thesis for a long time that having a roof over your head and walls around you depresses you. It compresses and constrains you and doesn't allow you to have a larger, more expansive, more elevated perspective. So I think we're kind of, by the way that we live, we're kind of closing ourselves in. And so time in nature is a way to address that. And you don't really need to meditate, you just need to let your mind slow down and open up. That's what we do artificially with meditation. When you're walking in the woods, after a while, it becomes less important about what's happening in the city, and you slow down and you open up. And that seems to be salubrious, helpful, beneficial physically and emotionally.
Back to you. So,
Yeah, let's keep expanding a little bit on that. I think it's quite fun. So yeah, there's different types of exercises. They're different for different people and different moments. So the idea of the thesis as a whole is like everyone needs to exercise. So if I see a client say, I'm not really into exercise, I say, no, you are, that's a problem. You need to find something that you like to do that fits better your body, your routine, but you need to do something. As Spencer said, walking is great. I'm very interested in longevity, so I really like to study blue zones. So there have been some really interesting studies showing that many of the blue zones in some places, villages are close to each other, but when one has more longevity than another one of the things, because many of them are in Europe, is the inclination of that village. So when the village is more inclined, you need to walk more and do more strength, and this helps for your health. I always say when the person needs to choose only one exercise to do, the one that I think the science backs up the best is high intensity yoga. And the thing why is that is because high intensity yoga is a way of Westerns to put everything on the same thing, right? So because you do strength activity on high intensity yoga, you do aerobic because it's so fast and it's hard, so you get out of breath. You do flexibility at the same time, which is very important. There is a warm-up in the start and in the end, and you also meditate. Which contributes to what Spencer was saying, that it's very nice when you can put more than one activity together of the list. So for example, in Bhutan, people they walk with friends around temples. So they're doing 3 in 1, right? They're with people and getting better connections, and sometimes they're talking. They are praying at the same time, and they're exercising. So many times they can put together more than one thing at the same time. Can be a good idea. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on podcasts, because I'm a little bit against it, in the sense that I see some people, because I think it's bad for your mind to have this idea that you need to be productive all the time. And then sometimes with podcasts, people when I'm driving, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm running and listening to podcasts. They need to be learning and exercising, learning and driving, doing everything at the same time. And all great ideas in history have come from times you were not doing nothing. So most times we need smart people who have studied a lot. They're in the lab, thinking. But the great idea didn't come when they're in the lab. They go for a walk, they drink a coffee. And if you're on your phone or you're listening to podcasts, or if you're thinking, that's not going to come the big ideas. I think we need this times with space. And we cannot send a message to our subconscious that we need to be productive all the time.
So, I will say something like that.
We don't have a tooth and claw like some animals have. We haven't evolved that. We don't have wings. So we don't have, there's a lot of evolutionary advantages that we don't have. the evolutionary advantage we have is we can think. Okay, and that has been a huge evolutionary advantage. Animals are smart enough to not use their evolutionary advantage all the time. Birds do not fly 24 hours a day. They would die before that. We, unfortunately, use our evolutionary advantage all the time. That is, we think even when we're asleep. And so the idea is, if this is what helps us survive, we're going to do more and more and more and more and more of it. And it becomes counterproductive because we do too much of it. I wrote a poem a long time ago. A volume of verbiage is inversely proportional vis-a-vis veracity. the more you talk, the more you think in words, the less true you're gonna. So, where was I going with that? So if you are constantly feeding the left hemisphere of your brain with more and more information, it feels like you're learning something, you're growing, you're getting further ahead. But actually, what you're doing is you're imbalancing yourself more and more. You're disturbing the natural functions that should be happening. Also, you can't really do two things at once. When you drive and you're listening to a podcast, you're mostly listening to a podcast, and you don't bump into anything, sort of, but the data show that people that listen to podcasts actually get in more accidents, people that even talk to other people rather than try to get into one accident. So you're kind of sliding one for the other. When you're walking around all the time with something in your ears, like people do now, they're not really present. They're in that thing, and so they don't talk to anybody else, they don't see anybody else. It sucks. I mean, I walk around, and I even in beautiful places, I walk around and I look at a person to say hello, because we're in this beautiful place, and they're not there. They don't even see me. They're just like... So I kind of think that we're hooked. We're doing too much of a good thing.
I think that's great. There's so much I can say about that. I think one thing that is very important for us and for our longevity is our ability to do one thing at a time and to really be present on that thing that you're doing. Right, to feel if you're driving, you're driving. We're eating something, you're eating that thing. Like to really pay attention to that. I also think we need time to connect the dots. And this has to do with intellectual things and also with psychological, like feelings. So, really important theory like narrative therapy or past altering, like Jordan Peterson likes to call it, but it's mainly narrative therapy. It's this idea that you want to look back to your life and understand and find a way to tell a story about how you have lived and why you have done each of those things. And enough data shows like when you're feeling more connected, you're more proud of telling your own story, and you can embrace everything that you have done and kind of feel the building blocks of your personality, you are happier. And to do that, it requires a little bit of time, a little bit of thinking, a little bit of writing, and contemplative activities that include meditation to integrate. But they're not only meditation. Contemplative activities can be like walking in the nature without anything, like not listening to music and nothing, just be there, or sitting under a tree and then writing some stuff that comes to your mind. I always like to say that pen and paper are the best therapists you can have. I think the goal of therapy is to teach people how they can be their own therapists. Not that they're not going to need a therapist, but there's only 1 hour that you are a therapist without no week, right? What about all the rest? You need to be able to do your own self-therapy. Yeah. Should we go? I think we're going to do please.
Quickly, you're talking about being in nature. Do you consider working in your garden like being in nature?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, again, those pillars, I'm really hoping that this theory can go to a lot of people and a lot of people can find it useful. I'm not hoping that a lot of scientists are going to find it useful. Because to be useful to science, the distinction between each pillar needs to be greater than my theory is. But I think my theory is adding value to people how to put it into practice. So it's not really separate. You can do two things at a time. You are in your garden, maybe not as much in nature, but you are a little bit, and it's already helping a lot. And actually there's some research showing that doing your garden actually also increases longevity. On that research that I saw, they were talking a lot about just because you're kind of exercising, because it
get down there and do this and then do that. But I think there's also to do, because it's a contemplative activity, you're really present doing that. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go, because we have a limited time, let's move to the second pillar.
Yeah, I think a good way to move to the second pillar is talking about evolution. So we are not the strongest animals in the forest. So what made us, our capacity to thrive and to flourish as a species, was of course our intellectual capability, but more than that was our capacity to be together, to live in a society, to live into tribes. Because so for so many years, the biggest danger towards our life was not to be eaten by a tiger or anything like that. It was to be expelled from your tribe. Because if you are alone in nature, like you're in big trouble. So it's from that place. This is for like 300,000 of years. If you can read the beginning of everything, for all those times we have lived in tribes between 40 and 150 people. And on those tribes, it's very little amount of people, and everyone dresses the same way and has the same habits and believes in the same things. And the rules are quite simple, and it's easy to be accepted by everyone. But this thing is really built up in our brain. And nowadays, we're living in a cosmopolitan society where we know thousands of people. We come across people, we dress completely different ways, we have completely different habits, but we still have the system in our mind that we want to be liked from everyone. So one thing that's very important nowadays on happiness and well-being and live a good life is to adapt your biology to the time that we live in. And we have neuroplasticity, we have really intelligent brains, and have even epigenetic as a field that is growing quite a lot. So we have this capacity to train our brains differently. So first we need to understand not everyone needs to like us. I guess that's the first thing. Another important thing on the relationships pillar is Morty likes to say that good science is when the result shows something that no one thought would be the result. Because when the research is just showing something that your grandma knew, it's like, okay, fine, we're just proving the thing that we already knew. But like when something is really breaks and everyone is surprised, it's very interesting. And I think one of those research is the research on vulnerability. Right, so this research mainly on Brené Brown, and on this idea that when you show more of yourself, when you are showing your strengths, of course, but also your weaknesses, people like you more. Because people are way more intuitive than we think. We are all more intuitive than we think. So when someone presents themselves and says, oh, I'm great, I'm Diego, I'm such a good guy, I've done this, that, and this. And maybe I'm doing this today, which is the last thing that I wish to be doing. But we don't trust as much of that person. But when the person says, I think, the good things about themselves, but also say, yeah, but I'm not as good at that. Oh, at least I did. I said, I'm not as good in English, so sorry for that. So when the person shows some weakness, the connection is greater. And vulnerability helps you to connect deeply with the people that really matter to you, that really have a connection, that have things in common. And in some ways, it takes people that really don't have a connection, they go a little further to you, like they kind of go away. Not for sure, but kind of expel those people of your life, which is, I think is kind of good. So the 5 facets of relationships are, first, of course, your family. The second is your romantic life. The third is your friends. The fourth is your work. And the fifth is strangers, people that you don't know, which is sometimes taught in science as weak ties. I don't like much of the name, and a lot of people don't like it, but that's how they call it. Which is very interesting. So on Susan Pinker's work, she's actually a sister of Steven Pinker, one of the greatest psychologists alive. And she proved a lot of weak ties and the importance of in some villages on blue zones that she was researching, that one of the main things is like how much people knew each other's names and make an effort when they go to a restaurant, see what's the name of the server and call the person by name, or say hi to people. Like we are in a hiking special, saying hi to everyone, although he didn't know people. But this is telling your brain that you are in your tribe, that you are safe. So your stress levels goes down. Yeah.
got that about the weak ties. You understand that's the way they say it, but it's the casual encounters. Tiny. Let me say a tiny little bit. Which is
like a community, you know, your community, like your city, you grew up.
yeah, and then when you see people you don't know, that you acknowledge them, they acknowledge you. That's really important for you and them. I talked yesterday with one of my former students, just graduated UCLA, really smart guy, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of his life. He has a degree in philosophy, he doesn't know what he's going to do. But he's been fighting depression his whole life, so he goes in and out, and he's learning how to manage it. But he was talking about the various things that he's considering, and I asked him, how often are you going to places where people that do that or that are interested in that are? And he said, well, I'm kind of holed up right now at my parents' house, you know, it's kind of hard for me to get out. And I said, look, you're only moderately depressed. You're not severely depressed. If you're severely depressed, you couldn't get out of the house. You have to do the thing that you don't want to do, which is you don't feel good, you feel like you're going to not make a good impression, you don't want to go to this gathering or that meeting or that whatever. You have to do that. And every time you do that, you find the following thing, which he said absolutely is true, which is the depression lifts when you're talking to people, when you're interacting. You have to come to their level, you have to come to the surface level, and you're fine then. And then when you leave, it falls back on you like and many of us have had that experience, it's just kind of like, so the prescription, so I told him what you got to do is you got to make some of these thoughts into social connections. That'll also make you have more thoughts. You'll see more possibilities because you'll talk to people that will suggest things and you'll become aware of things. So he understood to do that. I don't know if he'll do it or not, but I think he will. But what I often tell clients is, how often do you go to the market? You know, or how often do you go out for a walk? And when you do you make it a point to look at other people, to say hello, to maybe even say something about the way they look, you know, I really like your shirt or whatever. If you do that, just that simple set of weak connections will greatly encourage you, help your mood, you know. And I think it's something that we're in the middle of in Santa Barbara. In New York, you don't say hello to anybody because they're all crazy, because there's too many of them, which is unfortunate. In Santa Barbara, it used to be, and most of us know this, it used to be everybody said hello to everybody. You walked down State Street, you saw somebody, you said hello. It was just natural. You didn't know them, you said hi. Now it's gotten a little more LA-ified, and you do and you don't. But I think that we need to make a point for our own good and the good of everybody that's seen, because everybody wants to be seen, that's the major thing, you know, is you acknowledge people when you walk by, you just nod to them, or you look at them, or you say hello to them, or you just say hi or something. It helps both parties. And I think it's something that the society needs to do in a concerted way. We need to acknowledge every human being that we encounter, at least at the level of giving them a slight bit of attention and not being so lost in whatever we're listening to or looking at that we don't even see them. So there are two comments. So this is Clark, right?
Yes. Well, Clark's loud. I want to clear this out. Name on that fifth facet. Was it weak French?
Yeah.
Weak ties. Weak ties.
Yeah, but or you can call it strangers or people you don't know much, or even don't know the names of the people.
Put your mic on there.
People that you don't know.
Okay, so did I see? Let's see, a couple of hands. Okay.
So I have 4 kids, 18 to 25. I'm the congenial type friendly person. They're like horrified by that. They tell me it's embarrassing. Why do I ask you? Why do you talk to everyone that you see? So are you seeing it, Spencer? You work with younger kids. Like, is it a generational sort of thing? Is that leading to part of their more anxiety and depression?
I'll answer then, I'll let Diego answer. But my answer is absolutely, there's a lot of generational stuff here. That is, because people in Generation Z are more anxious, they're more and more depressed, they're less likely to talk, and that makes them even more anxious and depressed. So there is they're afraid. And they're embarrassed because maybe somebody will see that they have, you know, peanut butter on their nose or something, I don't know. So yeah, I think it is generational, and I think that it's pathological.
I agree 100%. I think it is generational. There is actually two great researchers on that. One is John Twain, and the other one is Jonathan Haidt, and they have been pairing up and publishing a lot of things on this, and both have just wrote two new books on the field. So one is called Generations. So John Twain is the biggest psychologist on generations around the globe. She's at San Diego State. And Jonathan Haidt is a great psychologist. I'm a big fan of him, and he was on the morning years ago. He was his PhD student. And so her book is Generations, and it's one of the biggest research of all time. It's more than 30 million data points. I don't know how familiar you are with like science, but like used to be like more than 100,000 was like huge meta-analysis. Like more than a million was unheard of until big data came. Like this is a 30 million just in the US. So it's almost like 10% of the country. Very impressive. And talk about all generations in the book and the difference between and the book is in Jonathan Haidt is called Anxious Generation. And their data is so well done, so clear. The main problem is social media. There's no other problem besides that. Like you can see the data is so clear. Like someone came in, it's not a spike in anxiety and depression. Like, but when social media, it's so problematic. And I really think in the future it's gonna be the same as like nowadays you look back and say, how before it was all this propaganda to people who smokes cigarettes, like it took 50 years for the laws to pass. It's gonna be the same in social media. Like kids are not gonna be able to use social media in the future. I'm 100% sure. The data is so clear now, but it always takes so long, and they invest so much on lobbying in Washington, but it's gonna pass laws. So I think you're doing a great job on helping them to get out of their cocoon.
So I want to make a comment, and then I'm going to call Carl. So two comments. One comment is, while it's generational, it's also ubiquitous. It's everybody is less. These days, we're all more paranoid. Who's that crazy person? There's just less congeniality in the world. And we also don't know if that person is a Republican or Democrat. You know, there's a lot of fracturing. And then the second comment about that is, this is a shameless comment. When Jean Twenge was first publishing, before she got to be really famous, I saw her work and realized this is going to be the most important work. So I actually invited her to come to Santa Barbara City College and give a Mind and Supermind talk, which she gave at the Garden Theater. And hardly anybody signed up for it. So we actually had the Santa Barbara the SBCC Foundation fund her because she charged a lot of money. And then people could come for free, and so we filled the Garden Theater. Was anybody there for the Jean Twenge talk?
What year was that?
I was the moderator of it. It was like about 7 years ago, 8 years ago. You were there. Yeah, that was. Yeah. So I actually got her here when we could still afford her.
Yeah.
So
I have a class. She was a professor in my master's, which is really cool about my master's. Is like we have the best professors all over the world. And even I was telling Spencer the other day for the thesis, we can choose any professor to any school anywhere. So I'm very happy with my professor. I got done to Masoud. He's the director of the spirituality program at Columbia. So Columbia is the only place that has spirituality, the only big school in the world that has a spirituality program, masters in spirituality. I think they're great on doing that, merging spirituality and science and academia. But he needs to be very strong as a person to be like in an Ivy League top school and doing spirituality research. And he's a PhD postdoc. Had 3 masters. One was did my master's. I published 7 books, last 2 plus. So I'm very fortunate to have him as my advisor.
okay, so Carl, you wanted to ask?
Just back on the basic facets. I missed number 2. You started with family and then friends.
No, romantic.
Oh, romantic. You distinguished.
Yeah, more.
Okay.
So intimate relationship, and then what was the third? Friends, and then work, or if it's not occupation, it's what you're doing.
I think there's something to be said about work. This topic might be sensitive to some of you, but I feel it's just the truth. Retiring is really bad. I don't
don't know why people don't talk more about this, because the data is pretty clear. One of the worst things you can do is retire, because you need to have this motivation and occupation, and the world is changing so fast with so much technology, and the pace of things is growing so much. So there's so clear, like the chance of you gonna have Alzheimer's after you retire, if you retire earlier, your chances are so much higher. Your life expectancy goes down so much. Like this is terrible. This doesn't mean it's not good. For example, you have a 40-week job that you can retire. It doesn't mean it's not good to retire from that job, but it means you need to have something. So someone can be executive for a long time, and okay, now I don't want to work more 40 hours a week, or I want to do a move. Okay, you can become a consultant or a board member in different companies, or a professor at university, which I think universities really benefit when people that have done great careers come back and teach, because they have real experience. And I think so many times in academia it's just academics teaching business, which makes no sense. Right? You need like a lot of, or sometimes it's just researchers teaching psychology, and we need real clinical psychologists teaching as well. So it's really important to have a motivation to wake up every day in the morning, to have an occupation, and to do things that you feel that you are motivated, you feel you're growing. And when you have the capacity to build this thing you are doing now with your previous chapters in your life, that's the point I said before about narrative therapy. So for example, if a person was a business guy for his whole life, now he's 65 and he wants to retire, it's so much better if he goes to be a board member of some company, or a consultant, or go to school to teach that, or mentor some people, I don't know, but something that is somewhat related to that what he has done before. Then if he says, I'm gonna open a cafe, because it's okay to open a cafe, is too better than doing nothing, but he's not honoring so much his past, and he's feeling that he's starting from the zero again. So when you can connect the dots, that's better. And nowadays we live in a moment, because at every period of time there's the great sides and dark sides of the period. One of the good sides of nowadays is that each person can create their own professional self. Like a person like me, I'm just 27. Like I have been doing consultancy for companies since I've been doing lectures for companies since I'm like 21, 22. Like that would be unheard of 30 years ago. Like it's impossible. Like what is this kid gonna teach me? Like most of my clients are executives, like way older than me. And why? Because you have played professional tennis and you have done so many of these different things. So one of the ways to differentiate yourself in the market is when you bring your uniqueness. And to bring your uniqueness, you need to be able to connect the dots of your own history. Both Steve Jobs and there's a woman that J.K. Rowling, they both have really amazing graduation speeches that say the same thing. Pretty much the message is like follow your heart, and after that, spend some time connecting the dots. And spending some time like why your heart went this way, but don't try to connect the dots before you live it. Because sometimes you just feel in your gut that you need to go in that direction and you need to trust. Please.
Is there anybody or any organization that actually teaches this, or something like that, go to an organization, show me how to move forward with something that I did to move it, make it useful, teach it or whatever? Because I don't know where to start, connect with that. Somebody should teach people.
Yeah, I think many people do that in therapy, but it's somewhat expensive because you're paying someone to do privately. Another person, someone that I know that's trying to scale this up is Jordan Peterson, who is now, he's a very controversial guy. I really like him. Not on his politics, I don't care about his politics, but as a psychologist and a person that brings really important ideas from academia to the regular population. He's like the most famous psychologist nowadays. Definitely not the most respected one in academia, but the most famous. And he has an online course called Self-Altering. And they do 3 activities: past altering, present altering, and future altering. And he's a very good scientist, and he has a postdoc in Harvard, in Jung. He has specialized in Nietzsche and Jung, but his postdoc was in Jung. Actually, Jonathan Haidt was under him. So not exactly under him, but Jordan Peterson, when they met the first time, Jonathan Haidt was interviewing for Harvard, I think for his postdoc. And Jordan Peterson, when you got interviewed for a postdoc, you need many people to interview you. And Jordan Peterson was this weird person that was like at Harvard studying Jung. Like not many people are doing postdoc in Jung, you know, because Jung is not very scientific. I really like Jung, but he's very weird in a big school to be researching. People are not as scientific. We're talking about Spencer, like in his PhD researching things that are not very conventional for that time or even today. Yeah, so Jordan Peterson is one way to go. Spencer might have others. Another one is therapy. Like I do that with all my clients, like to do like this narrative, this storytelling. Where I call it storytelling of life, which I think is important. But I'm not the only psychologist that do that. I would say a lot of them do. Not enough.
I just off the top of my head, I think that AARP, AARP, which is great. If you're not a member of, okay, I joined AARP a whole long time ago, even though I'm not retired. Association, what is it, American Association of Retired Persons. For $16, you get discounts at various places, but you also get a magazine every month, which I actually read. It's really interesting. And you get a newspaper every month with the most important tips boiled down. Here's what you do about how to protect your online presence. Here's what you do about, here's what you need to know about how to navigate Social Security. I mean, it's one tip after another. For $16, it's so great. If you're not a member of ARP, be a member of ARP. And one of the things they do is they have all kinds of counseling things that you can do for free. Like, what do I do now that I'm retired and I want to use my expertise, or I want something to really keep me, engaged? What can I do? And there's all kinds of, they have all kinds of things that you can participate in to do that. Networks that they make. So that's a tip. Is if you're not an ARP member, I would totally suggest that it'll pay off a lot of times. Okay, so Heidi.
Hi, thanks for coming.
It's a pleasure.
Regarding retirement, I think it all depends on what you do with it. Okay, so I feel like I'm able to be free to really go after some things I couldn't when I was working. And it does connect with what kind of work I did. But I'm wondering if you're also looking at the period of time, or it might not be at a certain age, that this happens when the person begins to lose their health, when they begin to lose those really close relationships because people die. And I'm wondering if you're looking at how to stay happy. I've got my own answer for this, but I'm wondering if in your research and all of that, and in your thesis, you're looking at what happens when the person can no longer walk, and the closest people to them have passed away. And how do you keep your happiness then?
It's a very complicated question. I haven't looked exactly to that. I have looked more at average and other specific cases. So there's a famous graphic on happiness. It's a U shape. You probably don't know if you have seen that, but so I can draw there. But you start from here and you go down, and you end up on average, people with their older ages are happy in their happiest moment of their life. That's just average, right? And at the middle is the worst part of your life. It's like 45. And there's a lot to be said. Why is that? And I think it's because you got into the rat race until you're 45, and then you think, I need to buy a house, I need to marry these kids, and you are what Tal Ben-Shahar says is the arrival fallacy. Like, when I get the house, when I marry, when I get the car, when my kids go to school, then I'm gonna be happy. And then you're getting more miserable, and then something, okay, I'm getting something wrong, let me figure it out, and then move in a different way. And you start gaining more wisdom. Oh, there's one theory that I really like life is like a running race, so you know that shape. So the first straight line is about yourself. So you take care of yourself, and you do things for you, and you want to study, you want to make money, and then in a certain moment you understand, wait a minute, it's not only about myself, it's not bringing me all the happiness that I want. And you start to be more gentle with other people, and you want to take care more of your community. And since many of the times your kids are out of home, you're starting to expand your notion of family to more people and taking care of more people and creating more community. And you start to go happier. So that's all I have research on. So I do not have research, maybe Spencer has some, on how hard it is when you're losing family members and friends and how to deal with all of that.
I've been a psychiatric nurse, and the highest population was in their 70s and 80s wanting to kill themselves. It needs to be looked at.
So I'll just make two comments on it. I don't know there's probably a little bit of research, probably not a lot of research, not as much as there should be about this. The two things that come to my mind are, when you lose people, you need to actively seek to replace them in whatever way you can, maybe by volunteering, if you're not mobile, by doing online communities. But unless you make that effort, you get impoverished. And the other comment is the sad comment, which is because we don't have our tribes anymore. Old people here get more and more isolated. When you live in a tribe, you're not. That's the problem of the way that we live. Is we're too fractured.
Yeah. I think spirituality is the most important at the end.
Yeah, for many people, it's the spiritual community at every point in their lives is the cohesive core. Yeah. So Paula, and then we're going to do the third. Okay. Paula, go for it.
Where does gratitude fit into this? Because you can have all three pillars and not be happy, and you can have very little of it and be happy. I'm wondering about perspective and gratitude. How you fit that in.
Yeah, so no, because I had a name for the psychological pillar, essential growth, because I thought it was an important notion. But so gratitude is inside psychological pillar, and it's very important. And actually, Seligman and Peterson, with other 53 scientists, have created what's called character strengths that tries to be the opposite of DSM. So the DSM is the manual of all the disorders, psychological disorders, and the character strengths is supposed to be like the 24 main strengths that we have that create like virtues that we can contemplate. And then on those virtues, those strengths, there are some that increase more your happiness, and gratitude is in that top 5. And interestingly enough, from all the 24 strengths, gratitude is the easiest one to improve. So one of the sad things is like the strengths are very stable throughout your life. It's not very easy to increase strengths. It's as stable, I don't know that's better, but it's as stable as the Big 5. Mathematically looking, which Big 5 is really stable. Big 5 is the main psychological test we use. But gratitude is the easiest one to improve. So that's why so many people keep talking a lot about it. So it's very important to be grateful for the things you have.
So what are the 5?
I don't remember, but I can send to Spencer, they can send to you guys.
The 5.
I mean, we did that when we looked at the 24 things and decided what was.
Oh, okay. So the heart strengths are more predictive of happiness than the head strengths. So things like gratitude, forgiveness, hope, things like that.
I have the list on my phone, so I can look in the end of the class. I just gave a lecture the other day about it.
But it's pretty clear that the things that involve the heart rather than the head. Curiosity is a good thing, but it doesn't predict happiness as well as gratitude, for example. Paula, did it answer the question reasonably?
More or less.
More or less. Okay. All right. So let's, because we only have like 10 or so minutes left.
Okay.
Let's talk about the third pillar, growth.
Yeah.
Which I think, by the way, I think that this is not recognized enough, and I think it's a huge contribution to put it as one of the 3 pillars. I think that tiny comment, which is you always hear that we're programmed by evolution, by our genetics, to do 2 things: to survive and procreate. Right? Everybody knows survival and procreation. That's what it's all about. Only in the past couple of years have I realized that's wrong. We're programmed by our genes to do 3 things: to survive, to grow, and to procreate. Everything that is alive is growing. It's what, so growth is absolutely central to who we are. And so I think that putting it in happiness, it redresses a lacuna, a lack that's been there for a long time.
Yeah, I agree, and you had said this comment before. I'm so glad that you agree on that point. Many times growth is taught, actually, to use again the PERMA model, it's taught as achievement, which I think is problematic. It's a goal, and it's a whole concept. I need to achieve things, or engagement. And so the idea of growth is like, yeah, of course, you feel that you're growing, you want to grow, it's more intrinsic. There was a huge math analysis conducted by Alan Grant and colleagues, of course, and proving like how much when you are intrinsic motivated, you are way happier than when you're extrinsic motivated, right? And this means like you are creating your own goals, but also that the goals are inside. I want to be more patient with the people. I want to say more good morning to the people around me. So those type of goals make you way more happy to have them and to achieve them than I want to change my car, I want to change my house, or I want to buy that fancy whatever watch. Okay, so the third pillar, the growth, is the pillar that is, I would say, more complicated to explain and to put like into 5 facets. So I'm still struggling with that and how I'm going to explain in a short amount of time, because it includes pretty much a lot of what we know in positive psychology, and not only positive psychology, but psychology as a whole. Because you can see that the health one is not really in psychology. Relationships is a lot in psychology, but it's just a tiny part. All the rest goes inside growth. But one way to put it, the 5 facets, that's where I am right now, is putting the first one as purpose, and this comes work. So it's the idea that retirement, like you can retire, but then you need to find something. So like it's your purpose and work, and some people can call that ikigai, right? It's a Japanese concept. Another one is like self-actualization, right? It's a Maslow concept of it, and inside self-actualization enters a lot of very interesting theories. One, I don't know if you know that, I was very surprised. Self-determination theory is the most cited theory in the whole psychology. It's a very simple theory.
It's unfortunately not a good enough theory.
But I think that makes a point. So Ryan, the guy that found it, is the most cited psychologist alive.
Now,
the most.
Yeah, can you
It's
see
like
it?
gorilla.
I see everywhere. I know.
Everywhere.
It's unfortunately just a little bit of the picture. It's not the whole picture.
Yeah. Anyways, it's very interesting. But I think it's a point to be made. He created a very simple theory. It's called self-determination theory that everyone can agree on. Like you don't see even psychoanalysts. Everyone agree on. So it makes sense. So the idea is like to have intrinsic goals, intrinsic motivated. You need to have autonomy to do that. You're feeling that you're doing it because of yourself. You're feeling competent to do that, and you feel that you're doing that related to other people, and you feel related to like society. So that's the whole theory. Done. So it's kind of funny. But so SDT, self-determination theory, gets into that. Self-efficacy, Bandura's theory, which is similar to competence, gets into that. Agency, the new morning element theory. So this new morning theory is really interesting. He's making a big analysis, data analysis to the past, and making an argument that actually what moves society is the way we see our power to impact the world. So when it's a time that people are using more agentic words, like that I can change this, that we can change, we can improve, and we have a last, oh, the world is like this, there's nothing we can do about it. Is when we're using more of those words that actually entrepreneurial things happen and the world evolves. So all those theories get into self-efficacy. I can talk way more about agency. So agency, really briefly, because I think it's very interesting. It's a combination of 3 things similar to self-determination theory. So one is self-efficacy, so it's the belief that I can do that. The other one is optimism, that I can do that in the future. So I keep trying because I will be able to do that. And the third is imagination, the capacity to look things in a different way. This creates agency. And the fourth pillar of the growth is joy. Joy. Which joy can be said is the secret sauce for happiness. Joy is the part of happiness that you cannot touch. You cannot go for it. It doesn't happen all the time. It's like when you smile, when you laugh. I would make a huge argument that all the problems, main problems in society, is because we want happiness, but we go for pleasure. Pleasure and joy are similar, and we want to have a life that we're smiling all the time and having pleasure all the time, which is just impossible and creates really bad decisions because many things are going to increase our happiness are hard now, but they pay off in the future. And if you use our rational minds, they make a lot of sense. But if you're using as maximization of pleasure. And then, I didn't talk about the third pillar. So the third pillar is success and money, right? And the fourth pillar is joy. And then the fifth pillar is spiritual transcendence. Again, the growth pillar has a lot to do with, have another one. The growth pillar has a lot to do with Maslow's theory. You see the two of the 5 facets are in Maslow's theory. So one is self-actualization and the other one is self-transcendence. Many times the pyramid that we see doesn't include the one that's self-transcendent that's supposed to be above the pyramid. And on that is the spirituality, like the belief in something bigger increases your happiness quite a lot. You complain less, you stress less, you accept more the things that happen to you. And one good way of practicing spirituality is volunteering. It's what we call pro-social behavior. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we see some people that are rich getting happier, although they're above the line they're supposed to getting happier, is because they have more time and more money to invest in pro-social behavior, which really increases our happiness. It's very impressive how much when we help others, we are way more happier than we help ourselves.
So let's see where we are. So I think that we have to adjourn for today. I'm sure that there are questions that you have. You can either come ask them right now, or you can ask me next week, and I'll do my best to substitute a little bit.
Feel free to email me. I can put my email there. In my website, it's easy to email me. There's a part to email me, but I can put my email up there. And yeah, or my phone number. Come up here. I can put it up at the 5-page presentation. I gave a class on that 3 weeks ago. So we can even send the slides.
Also,
Do we have
real quick, yeah. When he retires, this old man next to you, you should take this class and teach it.
We'll see you next week, folks. Have a good week. Don't forget about those weak ties.